you hear these stories about awakenings, or what I wouldn't characterize it as an awakening. I suddenly started to think differently and realized I had all these presuppositions, which were way more complicated. And that internally felt, it was a very strange, strong feeling. And it wasn't a bad feeling. It was an exciting and liberating feeling.
Hello, and welcome to Awake at the Wheel. So in today's episode, we are joined by Warren Smith. Warren has recently gained some notoriety online for a viral video regarding him guiding a student through some critical thinking activities and exercises. This notoriety has reached quite far. He's been discussed by Candace Owens on her podcast, Brett Cooper, Elon Musk retweeted, and there was also a recent interview with Piers Morgan, among many others. So we're thrilled to have Warren here today to discuss one of our favorite topics, which is critical thinking. So welcome, Warren.
Yes, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So I want to discuss first, before we jump into the video, and probably something you've been talking about a lot is this video, but we want to know a little bit more about you, your teaching career, what kind of got you to this point. So introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us what you'd like us to know about you.
Sure. I'm from North Carolina, and since I was a kid, I really wanted to make movies and go into filmmaking. So I went to an undergrad. I did film school to LA for a bit, and that eventually brought me to graduate school at Emerson College. And I went to graduate school in the hope of becoming a teacher. I thought the ultimate variation of that would be to be teaching filmmaking at the college level, which I do part-time. I'm not a tenured professor at Emerson. I teach a script-to-screen and a filmmaking course, one each semester. And I started teaching full-time out right after graduate school at the high school level. And so that has been really interesting, and that's where this video came from. Yeah.
Okay. So that to clarify, the video then was you with a high school class.
Yeah.
So approximately what grade are you teaching?
I work with middle school and high school.
Okay. And is it common for students of that age to kind of tap into that method of thinking and kind of following that line of thought? Or have you noticed maybe a change away from that? What are some things you've noticed surrounding that?
I can only speak to what I've seen. So there might be teachers in other classrooms where I'm not witnessing that are actively discussing how to think. I know that for me, it just came about because it is the most effective way of trying to navigate sensitive issues, or really any issue, when you're trying to come to the best conclusion for the long term, for the sake of the long term. It wasn't a case necessarily where I was consciously engaging in critical thinking or the Socratic method, which is why I think critical thinking is so effective. It's within us if we just know how to tap into it. And when you are trying to navigate in the most efficient way possible, you'll notice that you start to fall into that pattern. It does help being able to recognize it when you are doing it and understanding aspects of it. So I do think it'd be a great thing to teach, and I am actively trying to develop a framework which would allow me to articulate it to students in a way that a step-by-step method that when you're in a real conversation, you can't be following, you don't have time to be following, but by practicing that beforehand, you start to internalize it so that it does become that instinctual thing we were talking about.
Absolutely. And as therapists, Oren and I use that method often with the clients and patients that we work with, because like you said, it's about learning how to think and not what to think. And especially in our role as therapists, it's hands off in terms of influencing what they think. So I love hearing that. And I picked up on that pretty quickly when I was watching the video. I'm like, hey, that's a method that we utilize as well.
Yeah. There's something about questions. There's a power in questions, which is when we watch a trial. Recently, trials have been becoming available online, like famously the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. But we see how when you evade a question, it's not a good look if you, so there is a power when you ask a question. In order for the conversation to continue, the question itself must be contended with in one form or another. Even if you do ignore it, it's still contending with it in that sense, whereas a statement can be ignored or disregarded. So.
Absolutely. And I think that leads to, I guess, a thought and a question that I have. And Oren, I want to hear what you think about this too. But I know in some interviews, Warren, people have asked you, like, what is it about this video that went viral? So when I think about that question, I have a couple of thoughts. I think that a lot of people, or more people than we think, want to think in this manner, but something has shifted. A lot has shifted in our world where asking questions has become a bad thing. So I think that this perhaps, at least in part, caught on because people are like, whoa, wait a minute. This is the way that I would like to conduct myself. And it's nice to see others behaving in that way. So I think that that's a big part of it. Warren, I want to know what you think. And then Warren, most importantly, I want to know why you think this caught on.
All right. Yeah. So what I think is even people, if you look online, they put quotation marks around just asking questions. They don't have the benefit. They don't give the benefit of the doubt. They don't believe that the person asking the questions is acting in good faith, is actually trying to arrive at either an understanding or a resolution or a compromise or something like that. They just feel that it's a gotcha. I think that's a big part of why people aren't able to have that. But the bigger one, I believe, is everything that you were saying, Warren, about the thought process, right? That's tapping into the logical, the rational. And unfortunately, the logical and rational will usually lose out to the emotional. And so when people are confronted with evidence that contradicts what they want to believe, if they think that, oh my gosh, acknowledging this is going to make me look a certain way, they get overwhelmed. This cognitive dissonance kicks in, and they just have such a hard time managing the emotional aspect of it that they start speaking irrationally. They start evading the question. They start going off on these different tangents that, they start fighting back. They get defensive, and they're not able to have that honest, good faith discourse that you've demonstrated in not just that original video that went viral, but I've seen now, I think 3 other videos, maybe 2 different teachers and a lawyer, I believe is what I've seen. I'm not sure if there's more, but that's what I've seen. And I see you really keeping them on track. And I'm watching them. I mean, well, I'm hearing them because you don't show their faces, but I can imagine them. They're trying to jump out of the guardrails that you're trying to keep them within, and you keep them really well contained within that. So I think it's a great skill. It's not just the critical thinking, but you're guiding them and helping them kind of deal with the emotional stress that they're going through and arriving at some type of dialogue. Because it's so easy that I see them, I don't think they're doing it intentionally, but I see it almost getting derailed, and you keep those guardrails intact. That's what I've been seeing.
That's a good point. There's something about detaching it from a claim, treating it sort of an experiment that is being examined, which allows us to be a bit more objective. So it's very different to say, this is what I think, change my mind, which is a common format we've seen. It's more something along the lines of, this is the least bad option I have been able to find to this point. Can you offer anything better? Let's contend with it. And then there is that aspect of following because logic there, and perhaps that's one reason that the video resonated, is logic. Objective logic can be followed. There's that thread. You can see this step leads to this, and therefore a journey occurs, which therefore becomes satisfying. In that sense, there's something different about it. But why did the video resonate? It is a question I've been asked, and I've been I do think there's also a component of a sense of when an accusation is made and there seems to be a lack of evidence that's, as far as to this point, that has been presented would not justify it. There's a large, and when you have a figure like J.K. Rowling who is so public, that magnifies that accusation. And there's a sense of, it's frustrating, I think, for a lot of people. And when they try and engage in the conversation, then they are attacked for it. So perhaps there was some catharsis through that video where they were kind of seeing something that they wish they've tried to do themselves or they want to do. Contending with that frustration, there was something there with that, I think.
And when you say about something, when you say that of what they wanted to do, what they've tried to do you mean that they tried to do what you did, which was to be able to get someone to challenge their assumptions, their false beliefs that was based on just things that they had heard in the ether, so to speak, and to get them to actually go, oh, wait a second. When I really look at the evidence, it doesn't support what I believed. Like that's what so many people try to provide the evidence and say, I'm not attacking you. I'm just saying that what you're saying doesn't jibe with the evidence in front of us, right? And the person is not able to acknowledge that. Is the catharsis in getting the person to acknowledge it, or is the catharsis in doing the acknowledging and saying, wow, I was wrong?
That's a good question. Yeah, maybe it's not the fact that they haven't been able to do it. It might be more the fact that perhaps they themselves, based on the evidence, do not think it's a fair characterization. And perhaps they have wrestled with it. I mean, I don't know. There is the major component, like had the student not acknowledged, like gone back to the beginning and recognized that the characterization was, given what was presented, the evidence was not supported, there wouldn't have been it wouldn't have worked in the same way. Now that wasn't designed or anything, it just was how it unfolded, but we should acknowledge that was definitely a major component of it.
So with the way that it unfolded, and like Oren mentioned earlier, this isn't the first time you've engaged in this, line of questioning and teaching and so on, but it's the first one that's gained attention. But have you received criticism either for this particular video or for your method of teaching? Because I surmise it is quite different than many teachers do approach such things.
A bit, yeah. Initially, because it happened on that Sunday, and then when I went into work on the following day, there was sort of, I didn't say anything to anyone. I wasn't sure who had seen it, wasn't sure what to do. And it was looking back on it, it was kind of funny because obviously everyone did know, and now the social dynamics, why was that eventually the principal said to me, he was like, yeah, it's not going to work not talking about it because everybody has seen this. Like, so there were some teachers that definitely would have looked at that and said that I was guiding the student or I was taking a position or they disagree with the character. It comes down to the fact that you have a couple categories here. Teachers that disagree with, they do think J.K. Rowling would be fairly categorized as transphobic. Therefore, they disagree with the entire thought exercise, we'll call it. That you have teachers that feel that the very act of, though the video did not break any rules, there was no student on screen, it was all, and I did meet with the lawyers after this, and they were very supportive actually, and I really respected their ability to be objective. So even though there were no formal rules broken for whatever reason, now that might be coming from a place of when someone suddenly has a spotlight on them and you work with them every day, there's that sense of, well, I do the same thing, why not me? Now, moving outside of the school, there was some activity later on X, then people started trying to tag Emerson College, where I teach as well, over and over, because that's the only public thing that you can find for an employer, very intentionally so. Now, but it did not initially happen after that viral video because it was just a flash in the pan. We have to be honest about that. It was just luck. And there was nothing to really contend with at that moment. But then after that, when I try and find my footing and then I do a further video, and I had received many comments on that video saying a lot was swept under the rug here. You should go watch ContraPoints video. And I responded, can you be specific about anything that was swept under the rug rather than just redirecting me to a whole new YouTube video? And no one could. So eventually I did watch the video and made that into a video as I was experimenting and trying to figure out, okay, I would be a fool not to try and do something with this opportunity. How am I going to do that? That video came out of that. Now at that point, then that's when the activity and the posting of the employer and all that over and over, that's when the whole mob thing started to appear. 3 days, maybe 4 days passed, and I realized I should just try and address this and contend with it. And that did seem to have a great effect, and I haven't really had any issues since then.
Okay. Can you elaborate a bit on what the issues people were taking with your work or your posts?
The YouTube channel was very small. It still is very small. At that time, it was very small. So that there was a sudden influx of, in a single day, I didn't recognize that pattern as potentially what I do. I'm positive, purchase subscribers. And I started researching, because then after every video that would come out, there would be a dump in subscribers the second after it was posted. And in the analytics, I started noticing things that this is very interesting, very strange. And then I researched, is this even possible? And I found people that had similar situations where competitors or whatnot were purchasing subscribers, which you can do for little money. And there's actual code you can find right there on how to write it so that this all becomes automated. You don't have to sit there and actually do this with a real person. It's just automated and boom. But it's just a YouTube channel. Who cares? That's not as, it was the thing that was fascinating was the actual activity with Emerson. That was because that was revealing. Their actions, it said more. I couldn't articulate as well as their actions could articulate themselves. It was, and I think it backfired in a way because it didn't look good. And then when I did address it by making a video about it and actually showing by retracting their names and everything, but actually showing their words objectively. I noticed a big difference after that. Some people even just vanished and deleted their accounts and things. And it hasn't been an issue since. And I'm just not going to worry about the YouTube stuff, the algorithm things. Like, I don't think it's going to be an issue moving forward. Hopefully not.
Okay, now you brought up a couple of points. One is, no pun intended, because the ContraPoint video, I know that you made the video and you were commenting on ContraPoints video, and you were trying to analyze. I think your video was about 14, 15 minutes maybe that you did. I think the original one. And you afterwards, I don't think you apologized, but you did, I think, acknowledge that there were some limitations in, let's say, in your original video. So for that end of it, or that part of it, you want to elaborate on, just because not everyone would know. So could you just sort of summarize what people took issue with, aside from the fact that you dared challenge the orthodoxy, right? Yes. But besides that, were there any valid criticism that you could say, reflecting on it, because you did talk about some of them, this is what I would have done differently. And second, let's say how you feel that your approach, like how well it worked.
Yeah, it wasn't so much that there were specific points people were addressing that I did wrong. It was more a sense, there was nothing really to contend with in that sense. There was one section where I think I might have made an error. I forget what exactly the wording, something between characterization of, and I said, J.K. Rowling is talking specifically about trans activists, not all trans people here. And they clipped that, and I saw that appearing. And I'm not even sure that was actually an error. I would have to, but I do remember seeing that clip a lot. It was more a sense of, I felt like there was so much attention on it, and so much, not attention, but potential people wanted it to be really good, and it could have been better. Because the ContraPoints video is 2 hours long. There's multiple videos. I realized halfway through, I thought I had the right video. And then I had been trying to really break it down and address everything in a very thoughtful way. And this is going to be way too long. And so then my analysis ended up being very brief in comparison. I guess what was like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that, out of a 2-hour video. But it was more so, it's not good to, I try and be minimal force in all things. Less said, the best said. If you can accomplish the same result with less, why not go with less? And that my demeanor was slightly different in that video. I felt like, not that it's artificial, but there was just something I don't know. I just feel like I could have maybe done a better job overall with it. But
did you feel that you had more of a bit of an attitude in doing it?
Yes, I think I was a little bit of a smartass.
Okay. Yeah, and the thing is, there was a bit of smart alecky or smart ass, but the fact is, in that time, the things that you're kind of pointing out, where you were sort of pointing out ContraPoints, let's say, almost a smoke and mirrors, where there are some valid points in there, but then ContraPoints, I don't know, sort of infuses the video with a whole bunch of other stuff that almost detracts from the weakness of the points being made, or the outright falsehoods being claimed.
Yeah.
You were pointing that out, and also, by the way, people criticize when I do this as well. If I say something on X and they ask me, certain question, I go, here, watch my video. I've already talked about all of this. And you're saying, I'm not going to go to this whole video to watch. So I get that. But anyway, I thought it was more, it wasn't a thorough, debunking of ContraPoints video, but it was showing these are some of the tricks being employed.
Exactly. That's a good point. It wasn't, and looking back on it, that's how I should have gone into it at the very beginning, because initially I went in thinking I could do a debunking video of every point, but that would have been foolish as well, because it's also too much. It was more, I realized it was about trying to point out, well, for lack of a better word, we'll call them tactics or strategies that are often implemented, where you do make something so big and broad with such flowery language and guilt by association. Suddenly you're talking about this person, it has nothing to do with J.K. Rowling, and it makes it so big that it's almost too difficult to even contend with. So therefore, we're going to make it specific and address very specific elements of it. The common thing that I kept noticing was by redefining the very core of the video, transphobia, redefining that, therefore you can eliminate the conversation from even taking place, which is a very common tactic we'll see in other spaces as well. I think that was the big takeaway from that one.
Right. And, Mallory and I have talked about this a number of times, the manipulation of language. Again, calling someone who disagrees with you a transphobe, for example, it's supposed to shut down the conversation right away. And again, I think that's why, once again, the video with your student really resonated, because you didn't allow that to happen. You said, let's take a look at that. Let's really dissect this and see whether these are the appropriate terms or allegations.
Yes,
and I think it really, really resonated. That's lacking in so much of these discussions. They're always so bombastic, and everyone's just trying to get you and make a point without, they're not really listening. Yes. I think people really heard you. You were listening. And that's with your other videos as well. Again, and I see you're very thoughtful in those videos. I'm watching you, you're calculating, you're thinking, you're trying to, you're not just trying to dismiss what they're saying. You're saying, okay, what are you saying? Yes. How does that add to the conversation? Are we staying on track? Where do we go from here? And so on. Yes, I think it really comes out in the video. So I got to ask you, did you, these approaches, did this come from something that you had done since, teenage years? Did you, read certain rhetorical instruments or devices and so on? How did you get to this approach that you're demonstrating in these videos?
That's a good question. In graduate school at Emerson, that was when I would say that you hear these stories about awakenings, or I wouldn't characterize it as an awakening. I suddenly started to think differently and realized I had all these presuppositions, which were way more complicated, and that internally felt, it was a very strange, strong feeling. And it wasn't a bad feeling. It was an exciting and liberating feeling. And I started to explore more, and I started to realize I disagreed with people around me, the closest people in my life. And so when everyone around you disagrees, your family and your friends, your childhood friends, everyone, and yet you still see the logic in your reasons for why you're thinking the way you're thinking. But if you attempt in the wrong way at all, you have to be very careful if you do address any of that, because there's such emotional baggage that comes with it and connection with all of what they already think, and they're not used to anyone disagreeing, especially a family member or a close friend. And there's almost a shame that, I can't believe are you this now? Does that mean that you? And so it allowed me to just, I think subconsciously, I just developed, I came to peace with being comfortable with my reasons, and I didn't need to disagree on everything. I didn't need to verbalize it unless there was a very good reason, which I could explain to myself. And then when I would do that, if I did see something that was worth talking about with them, I would have to do so in a very objective, kind manner, which I think was the most effective way for me. And that has led me to what is now, I believe, the most effective way for me in these conversations.
So it's so interesting, and Oren and I discuss this often amongst ourselves and on this podcast, that that what you described there, that's, I think, in large part the goal of higher education, right? Is to have that awakening and have that moment of, okay, I can shift the way that I think, I can look at things differently. But sadly, that's not being promoted as often or in the same capacity that it was in the past. So for you, did it go beyond that as well? So like, as far as your upbringing, your childhood, did you grow up in a very open-minded household that facilitated you to be able to have that awakening?
No. Like to this day,
Okay.
my mom is terrified with me even going on podcasts. Honestly, I just don't talk to her about it and everything. Like when this all happened, the initial video, she doesn't really understand the internet is in the same way that a lot of.
Yeah.
So she realized it was big and everything, but then she was very worried about don't talk like this person, don't do. And she's still like that. My brother was initially that same way. He then, through his own experiences, really came to his own realizations, and now I would say he thinks in a similar manner as I do and questions things. And so we have each other in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I wouldn't say it was. No.
Okay.
And I should say this: my mom is the smartest, strongest person I've ever known, and it's amazing when the strongest, smartest person you've ever known still shows extreme emotional attachments to
Mm-hmm.
an inability to engage in certain logical conversations because of everything else that's associated with it, and they just can't seem to get past that. So it's I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah. So I guess along that same line, do you fear that this will negatively impact your career? Do you believe that it's going to open more doors for you?
It has the potential to open more doors. It has the potential to impact my career negatively. It depends on what I do. And so I do need to proceed with care. The lawyers made that very clear as well at school. They're like, this is great. Congratulations. I hope you don't make a misstep. Essentially, this is the takeaway. Now, I view it as I have a responsibility to try, and if something remarkable like this happens and a door does open and I have an opportunity, I have a responsibility to myself and to those that I care about in my life and those that are to come in the future, to make the most of whatever is given to me. And so I don't think ambition is a bad thing. I'm not ashamed to say, yes, this is an amazing opportunity. I'm going to run with it as far as I can. I think you have a responsibility to do that. Yeah.
So what do you think it is about you, either your background, your psychology, your emotional functioning, that when given this opportunity, and not just given the opportunity, but very quickly seeing the potential costs that come with it, seeing people trying to tag Emerson, trying to get you canceled, trying to get you fired, right? Just because you dared engage in wrong thought or wrong speak, right? What do you think it is about you that makes you say, you know what, I'm going to embrace this opportunity and take a risk?
It just seems like it's the most sensible thing. Applying critical thinking to it, looking at every angle, recognizing that there's no going back on certain things. I can't undo something and I don't regret it. I'm very thankful for it. It's awesome. Yeah, it's going to change things. And I could just step away completely and it would fade. It's not going to change that much. It's not like this has ruined anything. People will forget it. Or I can, at one point I was thinking, wow, the only way through is through all the way. And I either have to decide to fully commit to this and see what I can make out of this, or step away. And there's not really going to be the middle ground. There could be a middle ground, but so therefore applying logical thinking, it just seems like the wisest course of action to me. And as I was just saying, I do believe strongly that you have a responsibility to do the most that you can with what is given. And this is how I'm doing that. I don't know if there's anything special about me or not. allows me to do it. I just see that as the logical course of action.
Okay. So there's logic, but there's also, would you say that's, if you tied into what you sort of alluded to a couple of times, what would you say in your values, your value system is what makes you say, I'm going to follow this logical course of action rather than,
Yes.
disregarding it?
Yeah. Most people, I think it's easier to be foolish than wise. It's often being wise requires making the difficult decisions. And okay, so most people are going to take the path of least resistance, like water, naturally. But I think there's value in being able to make the difficult decision for the long term. And I'm trying to think how to contend with the question that you're asking. It's the emotional aspect of it. There's usually the harder course of action. There's that saying we always hear that nothing worth doing is easy. It's easy. And so it's something along those lines. I'm not afraid of doing the hard thing because the goal means that much to me. So it overrides the difficulty. I've had to go on a journey to get to this point. I'm 36 years old, so I've seen I've been through some things, and so that's made me who I am, and it's brought me to that realization. I could have easily not have arrived at that realization had other things in life, had I gone other ways, but here I am. So, yeah.
So what would be an ideal outcome? You said you're talking about the goal, the end goal of this. I guess, is there an end goal? What 5 years from now, let's say, would be an ideal outcome for all of this?
I really love teaching and being able to share that with people online. And I'm not able to do that in the classroom anymore after this. And there's some really remarkable things happening online. Jordan Peterson's university or whatnot. Now, I'm not saying that they would ever allow me to be part of that or that I'm even qualified. I'm not on that level, nothing like that. Or like I can't contend with him in any way. But it is cool to have a goal to be like, that would be really cool to be able to do something like that. So I don't know. I'm just trying to make the most of it. But if I could snap my fingers, it would be doing something with them in that space, the Daily Wire, what they're doing. Like I was talking about being a filmmaker, I still am. I'm still trying. I will always do that on my own. I'm always writing and creating, working with a camera. And with the Daily Wire, I've never seen anyone go up against Hollywood before. And that's what they're doing. And it's pretty remarkable. So if you could be like, you can go work with anyone, I would want to be part of that. Yeah.
Good.
Very cool.
Yeah. All right. And so, we're going to bounce around with these questions.
Sure.
So, I've got so many questions to ask. So I guess one question then, I've got two totally different questions. I'll just go with one of them to start. I've been teaching for many, many years, decades at the university level. I've taught at different levels as well. So I've watched, and as therapists, Melanie and I have watched, we have a lot of young people coming in. And so we've seen changes, not just in the people that we talk with, but in what they're describing as their environment, especially the academic environment. So over the last number of years that you've been teaching, have you seen a gradual shift? Have you seen a radical shift in the sense that, again, it's no longer about, very rarely is it about critical thinking. It's about what you're not allowed to say. It's about making sure you don't offend people and so on. So on the high school level, what has been your experience?
That's a good question. Having a foot in both worlds, college level and high school level, I would say the college level, higher education is more concerning for me. That's where we seem to see more extreme positions being taken, things that you're not allowed to say. And was it gradual? I mean, I showed up at graduate school in 2016, and that was the year of the election. A lot of things started changing. Discourse changed greatly, but I think the foundation was in place, and that just kind of it caused it to move faster. Now, but I had never seen anything like that before, and that because I had undergrad. I didn't notice any of this in undergrad. Graduated in 2013, and so now we're a few years later, and it was shocking. Yeah, so I can't say if it was gradual because it just was full on at that point and that's what it was really, it was something to contend with for me. Yeah, it was surprising. It's troubling. Some say it's a bubble, and I think there's validity to that, a bubble that will burst. Tuition prices increasing, and you could argue that the value of the product is decreasing. It's remarkable how that it's one of the only areas in life where we see that. Yeah. So I hope that answers the question.
Well, I'm just going to follow up on that. So you're not seeing it that much really in the high school. You're not seeing this stark, pattern that we've seen.
I have. So I was teaching a journalism class my first year, and a student, I had was the lead player on the female lacrosse team. And she was very concerned because she had a good friend injured during a recent game and wanted to write in the journalism class, do an article about that. Now this student, this is just an example that stands out in my mind because she was trying to go out around and get some teachers' perspectives and couldn't get a single adult to comment. So there was that sense of fear. I'm not sure it's comparable to the higher ed level. There's not the same political agenda as in higher ed, where it's everywhere in higher ed. It's plastered on the walls. There's a department devoted to it. It's not the same.
But when you say injured, I'm just curious, that made it so controversial. Was the person injured by a trans?
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Yes, I didn't provide the full context. Yes, a game where there was, I think a biological male playing on the girls' lacrosse team.
Gotcha. That makes sense, right?
Yeah, okay. Sorry. Key component.
Right, talking about bearing the lead. So yes. Okay. And then the second question, totally again, this different path, which is one of the videos that you were watching, and I commented on X, where it was another teacher, and you were doing the thought experiment of if you could build a wall that would keep out or that would prevent child trafficking and fentanyl or drug, bringing into the country. Okay. I just watching it, I was pretty astounded, and I was watching you. You were incredulous at times, but again, you were civil. You kept the things on track. So I got to ask you, and if you can, in your answer, maybe give some context to that, so people can understand what to you was either the most satisfying or gratifying, if there was anything, about that particular conversation.
We were talking about how logic. There's a thread that can be followed. In that video, it was very clear. You could see the other person did a good job. This was a teacher he did it, and I was thankful for his willingness to engage in it. And those were his honest views and his honest responses, as you can tell watching it. But you could clearly track his points. You can understand what he's saying. Doesn't mean it's still a bit mind-boggling for me when you say, so if you could stop trafficking of children across the border, the flow of drugs, all you have to do is press this button, which will then execute the building of this structure. We'll take out the word wall, the structure. Would you do it? No. Really, that's something to contend with. So there's a but what's interesting is that you would get that response more often than you would think. And that's what's interesting to me about it. And then, like you said, sticking on it. Don't let them veer. Don't stay objective, but focused on the experiment at hand so that you can contend with what they're actually saying, right? And that's where you start making it. And what was interesting as well about it is that his points illustrate the same rationales that will be used on other thought experiments or points. Or would you vote for Trump if it meant ending a war? Many people, my mom included, says no, never. Even if wow. So it was sort of a framework for that philosophy. There's two different philosophies on either end of this political spectrum, and it's good to be able to recognize both and apply both when necessary, strive for something in the middle. It's really good to be able to understand them. And that was a great exercise for being able to understand that thought process.
Right. Oh, sorry, Malik, I just add to that. It was also a great example of, and no offense to this person, I mean, he seemed to be engaging in good faith with you, but showing how powerful ideology can be, how someone's logic can go out the window. And now we know with AI with Gemini AI or something like that, something else, I forget the exact statement, but it was something like, would it ever be okay to misgender somebody?
Yes.
If doing so, I think it was like to save the population or to stop a war or something like that. And AI, based on, the biases of the people programming, saying, no, never. I mean, it just shows you that's the strength of ideology. And that's what's ruining discourse. That people, it's like a religion. You cannot, commit heresy.
Yeah. And right after the camera stopped, I just today, an hour ago before this interview, posted the conclusion of that conversation. If you do want to check it out, it's kind of interesting because he does end up realizing it's kind of interesting. But after we stopped, camera was off, I said, don't feel stupid, because I understand you don't want to, his essential theme, the central idea is he didn't want to spread suffering anywhere else in the world, where essentially it came down that he didn't want to spread our problems on impose our problems on anyone else. And that's a noble sentiment. So you're not a bad person. That's not a bad thing to have that sentiment. I applaud the nobility of it. But critical thinking is about, again, the difficult decision for the sake of the long term. What's the least bad option?
Right.
And I said to him, I said, dude, because I talked to him often about Churchill. I said, just imagine being Winston Churchill during Dunkirk, and he had to make that call for an entire battalion to draw fire away and sacrifice themselves. Like there's hard decisions in the world so this was an exercise just in thinking along those lines. It's a terrible thing, but critical thinking.
Yeah, and it leads into something that we often talk about, which is good intentions executed poorly. And I do really believe that many of these people, whether it's in a thought experiment or in real life, they do have good intentions. They do, want to do the kind thing, but in doing so are not thinking broadly enough and aren't thinking about, what is the least bad outcome. And it's just, it's really tricky. And I think that there's so many different layers to it, but I just wanted to throw that piece in there because I do think that it initially is well-intentioned.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. Like my friends, I was talking to my friends and family are not bad people. I can understand. Yeah. And I used to think that same way. And so we all want, most of us want a better world. We just disagree on how to get there, but it comes down to the emotional attachment to that wall is associated to something else that I will never, ever, ever, and no matter what the rationale, so the emotional attachment overrides logic.
Right. And I said this maybe 6 or 7 years ago in one of my interviews. I was saying that because someone was asking, why do people get so defensive? Why do they become irrational? And I say, because it's no longer it's become, in the last number of years, it's not that I'm arguing or trying to defend a point. The point is me. It's the people have become so emotionally associated and personally associated with, again, that ideology, let's say, or that camp, or that identity. Yeah. So again, to give up a point would be basically to sacrifice myself, to become a martyr, actually martyr would be the wrong word, but it's just, I'm cutting off a body part if I'm to give up a certain point. And that's what people have such a hard time. That's what critical thinking is about. And you said it. There's no ideal answer. It's the least bad option. And I've said this, I think, the last few podcasts. I don't know if Scott Adams of Dilbert fame, he's talked about this a number of times, but I think it's so appropriate. He talks about the difference between systems and goals. And he kind of summarized it. And this is not a political statement here, but he does it. That the left are about goals, like, let's say, eradicating poverty. Okay. But the right, or the conservative, is about systems, which is, how do we do that? Right. You can have an ideal, but we need a logical, effective, practical way to achieve it. Yeah. And that's what we see in these discussions here.
And it's such a lazy ideal because, of course, you're against poverty.
Right.
So but there's something interesting in a claim. Because if one person, if a coworker at work who you really don't trust and they've backstabbed you, if they make a claim, you're contending with the claim through the lens of that person and all that comes along with them. And then your best friend or a family member who you do trust makes the exact same claim. That claim now takes on a different meaning, which is why the whole format of this is my position on this, change my mind, which Steven Crowder made famous with and he's got it on the slogan and the blah, blah. It's different saying this is the least bad option that I've been able to find. Can you offer anything else? Because we're contending with that, not me. Yeah.
Right.
I was going to say, do you think that there are steps that, we'll talk about students, because I think that, children are the future. So let's look at what young people can do to have an openness to that level of thinking. Because I think that that's a big barrier. And I think we're all saying it without directly saying it, that obviously is the ideal way of thinking, but there's a huge barrier getting in the way of people being open to doing that. So what can perhaps young people do or parents do to encourage that way of thinking?
I really don't think it's the kids that are the problem. I think it's the adults. The kids are made of the same stuff. We were, our grandparents, my granddad, the World War II generation, our brains are made of the same stuff. I'm sure there's been some change over time that I'm not scientifically qualified to. But it's the circumstances, it's the adults who are allowing the conversations to either happen or not happen that will then ask the questions that provide the platform for the debate, to encourage the debate, that it allow the office of whatever at the university, allow anonymous bias reporting to occur, that then validate those claims, which validates the way of thinking. I don't think that the blame lays in the kids, but then you see kids that they're so sensitive and they're leaning on certain aspects of therapy, perhaps in a different way than be most effective. But again, it comes down to the adults. That's our role as the adults, that we have to take the responsibility for it. And it's so easy just to point the finger and blame the kids. But I wish I could answer that better. But that's the common theme that I've been asked that. I think that's the best answer I can provide, is it's not the kids really, it's us.
Yeah, and I think inadvertently you're seeing that. You mentioned in high school, it's not quite the same as what you're seeing in higher education. So it seems like the kids innately do want to think openly, but as they age and are exposed more to the world, that does change.
Yeah. I've had kids ask great questions. Yeah, and they're baffled. I had a student ask me, a high school senior, ask me what socialism was. I had a student the other day, didn't know World War II was fought over, didn't know what it was about. And I was just, anyways.
Well,
yeah.
Well, and this is such a common refrain these days, where they're saying, instead of dealing with the basics, whether it's math, English, history, whatever, or science, we're looking at DEI. We're trying to, we're promoting these harmful ideologies to the point that even raising certain topics, using certain words, is violence and so on. So in your classroom, do you think that, like, I have to say this in my lectures at a university level, where I'm saying, hearing what I'm about to tell you, I say, look, you may disagree with it, you may not like it, it may cause some kind of emotional reaction, especially if you've had an experience that is directly related to, or somebody who's been affected by these topics. I deal with human sexuality, so deal with some of the worst topics you can imagine, like sexual assault and so, like, just some terrible things. So, but I have to, because of, let's say, my bosses, I have to basically lay it out ahead of time and prepare students. And I'm telling them, look, you can make it through. You can handle this. I'm almost coaching them, saying, you're not going to like what you hear, some of this, but you can do it. Where in the old days, didn't have to do that. A few people might get offended, they might get upset, they might get triggered, but the vast majority were able to hear it and function. But again, now I have to preface it with all these caveats and so on. So in high school, are you doing that as well? Or do you think that just bringing the topic in, just like, hey, this is what we're talking about, is the better approach? Or what are you allowed to do in your class when we bring up sensitive topics?
I just go for it. I don't know, hope I don't get in trouble for saying that, but no, I'm fortunate at the school. There's not a ridiculous amount of oversight in that sense. It is a publicly funded, so they do this thing where it's, which is understandable, bias. They want to check for bias, make sure that there's no bias, which is understandable. It's about what to think, not how to think. And that's a noble pursuit, to say, try not to be biased. it's not even that intense, but there is that effort. I don't, and I'm fortunate to be in a position where if I'm at Emerson teaching, I still don't. I haven't had anyone complain. I understand absolutely what you're saying and why you have to do it. You're in a different position, and it's unfortunate because then that prepares them to be effective. It's almost, it's giving them the. But anyways, I feel for you.
Okay, so you haven't seen that you haven't
I've
had
seen
to do
it,
that.
but I wouldn't say that I'm overly bogged down by it. It's not. Yeah, I've been fortunate in that sense. That's just a circumstance of where I am and how the ability to have a little bit of freedom on what I do. That's
okay. And now this might get you in more trouble with your colleagues. And if that's the case, we can edit this out. But now that the colleagues know what you do, they know what you're teaching, they know your goals and in your approach. Are you getting some of them saying, you can't, forget YouTube and all that other stuff, but just as a teacher, you're not allowed to do that, or you're inflicting damage on the students? Are you getting any of that feedback?
None of them they say not to my face. They'll do it behind my back, and they'll talk about how I was wrong and all those ways that we listed. And it's because I have that close circle that I do trust that will tell me when it occurs, and it's when they're there, but I'm not, then it does occur. But no one has come to me directly and said anything like that. But it's also because I've been very fortunate. The very top leadership, meaning like the legal, like the business, the C, that level of it, that's not even really in the school, the real that would make the budget decisions and all that, they've given that objective blessing, which I really do am thankful for, that saying, well, there was no rules broken. As long as you're not biased, you did it in a well-meaning manner, and it was well articulated, that it was thoughtful, and we want to respect your freedom of speech outside the classroom as well. So we can't control what you do at home, but be careful you don't make a misstep. So it's more indirect. It's more of, yes, I've noticed differences, and there are some people that do, when they do get a bit of control, some more than others, it feels like they're trying to, just in the last few weeks, maybe make things a bit more difficult, but maybe I think most of that's just coming from a place of ego and power. And, it's not so much political disagreement as just workplace politics. But I've been very fortunate. If I was full-time at Emerson, I'm sure I would have protests and things already. I have a class starting at Emerson next week. So we'll see how it goes.
Right. Okay.
Which to this point, and I'm going to make a very obvious statement here, but Warren, you're very clearly intelligent, articulate, skilled, talented in your own rights. But the fact that this became such a big issue is just crazy to me. We're talking about thinking, we're talking about learning, we're talking about using our brains, and it's become this heavily politicized topic that's just blown up, and it's crazy to me.
Just the fact that it went viral is crazy.
Yeah.
It shouldn't have been anything that was, it was even, that's what Brett Cooper said, and I agree with her. She's like, it's sad that this is worthy of even going viral, but that's the state that we're in. And she's right.
Okay, and to that point, I've got to ask you then, you alluded to it earlier with your own experience, and I have many people, whether they're high school students, university students, or professionals, 40, 50, 70 years old, where they're saying, and I want to ask you this, there's going to be a question at the end, which is, they say, it feels like I'm the only one who could see that the emperor has no clothes, okay? But I'm terrified of saying anything about that. So let's say to a young person or to an older person, if they're feeling that way, which is incredibly isolating, right? And for some people, I've had patients who actually question, they go, wait, am I a racist? I thought, or am I the bad person here? And so I didn't think I was, anyway, so they're struggling. So whether it's in the practical sense of having to deal with the world around them, who all seem to see the world differently, or an internalized, like, what's wrong with me? Am I seeing the world wrong? How would you advise someone to be able to deal with that if they are the one who sees, the emperor is running stark naked?
understand the reason. Understand the reason why, if you are engaging in a conversation like this, it's not just the goal. The thing that's even more important than that is the reason. So J.K. Rowling, that example, the reason was perhaps this is not a fair characterization, and that has larger implications on other things beyond just this topic. And if you really understand that reason, it allows you that piece to be quiet when you're and be quiet in the sense of knowing when to pick your battles, because you understand. It allows you the confidence to understand why you feel like the emperor has no clothes, and wow, how am I the only one who sees this? There's got to be something wrong with me. There's no way this. Then you start questioning that. Think through it deeply. Really think through it deeply. Test it using what we're talking about, these conversations, and test it again and again when you can, in a way that, and if the result is logical and you still see the emperor has no clothes, chances are emperor has no clothes, and that's okay. And you understand it and the world will catch up.
Can that be lonely though?
Yes.
Understanding it and hoping the world catches
it's
up.
Very lonely. Yeah, but doing the right thing is not easy.
Yeah.
Okay, and so that goes back to one of the questions I asked you earlier about the values. So you would say that one of your values is doing the right thing, not taking these. That's
trying to do the right thing, willing to be alone, willing to do the right and be alone. But I'm okay on my own. I've always, in high school, I was that kind of guy. Like, the filmmaking dude who would. Yeah, I've been comfortable with myself, and I shouldn't say that comfortable. But that's taken me a while to get to, but. I've never been I'm an introvert, and I don't need to, I'm not always the party guy going out, like being out. Yeah, I would say it's more that I'm comfortable if I believe the reason, and if I've really thought it through, then I'm willing to do it. That's just.
Okay. So I'm going to put you on the spot then. Okay. Because it seems like what you're saying is that the fear of the consequence didn't stop you. You didn't know what could happen, even with making these videos, right? Like as far as like what people think of you or being isolated or something like that, you're saying that's not enough. So can I ask you, is there a particular consequence where you say, you know what, if I knew ahead of time this would happen, I wouldn't be willing to, put my neck out there?
Well, I didn't know that video was good. I thought it might get 100 views. So it's not like by upload, which is the thing that started all this. So when I did upload that, it wasn't as though I was voluntarily setting out into this, you know what I mean? So that's now, but after it did, then I was faced with that quandary, that decision of, do I lean in or fall back? And I balance it. And it's just it's such a remarkable opportunity that I am willing to take those chances, and it might go badly. I would have, as far as essentially that thought experiment that you're proposing, it would have to be something along the lines of, what would the consequence be? I guess I would need it to be more specific. There's nothing yet that would make me feel that way. It could happen, but no, I would rather, it's just too remarkable. There's too much, it feels too unique. It's just too crazy. This whole thing is just so ridiculous. I would regret it for the rest of my life if I did not try and do absolutely everything I can with it, regardless of the consequences.
Okay. So, and that's important again, whenever Mallory and I do these topics, it's like we're trying to help other people see that, these different perspectives or these different things that might motivate them to do something different, get out of their comfort zone. So you're saying that almost the fear of regret is what compels you. You don't want to have that regret.
Yes, that's one of the worst. I'm more afraid. Like the Piers Morgan interview presented itself the day after I got back to work, and I had to make the decision: do I do this? And if I do so, I'm not going to be able to say anything to anyone, because then the principal might ask me not to do it, and if I'm in that position, I know which way I'm going to go. I'm going to do it, because I don't want to. So I didn't put the principal in that position. I just went and did it and then took the flack for it after. And it was okay. If you have logic on your side, things seem to work out. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll just end with that. I don't know.
I love that answer. That was kind of what I was getting from all of that, is be measured, but also be willing to take a risk in doing so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Understood.
Okay. Well, I feel like we could talk for hours with you, Warren, but I know that you're a busy guy and we've been going for about an hour now. But are there any last thoughts, anything we haven't touched on that
this was
you'd
awesome.
like to add in?
This was great. I think this has been really interesting. I'm an admirer of your work. And thank you so much for your time. And if you ever want to talk again, let me know. Keep it up. You guys are awesome. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Warren. We truly appreciate having you on as well. And as a fellow critical thinker, and I'll speak for Warren too, this has just been wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. And again, I really do hope people will see you're an ordinary guy. You don't have FU money, right?
Right, I don't. I'm a teacher. I'm a school teacher. Definitely don't have FU money.
Right? Yet there's something about you. There's something about your values. There's something about your goals that are, again, allowing you to do something that could have some huge positive impacts. It's getting the conversations going. It's getting people to see, oh, this is possible. It's bringing us back to a time where we could have these discussions. I don't even like the word debate. I prefer discussion, where we're not trying to win somebody over. We're just trying to express our opinions. We can disagree. We can find out where we differ. See if there's room for modification of our perceptions and so on. And I just love that. And I really think that it's, again, that one video has just inspired so much conversation. And it came from such an innocuous place, a classroom, right? So I am so grateful, A, for you having done that video, B, for you picking up on that and continuing and really trying to promote this critical thinking and civil discourse, right? Mm-hmm. And C, for coming on. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you so much. That's very kind. I really appreciate it. I appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Okay, so until next time, keep your eyes on the road and your hands upon the wheel.